Okay. So we have the first question. Can you get into real estate with little money? If so, how?
Go ahead.
Well, the answer to that is yes. First of all, for anybody who was here earlier, for people who want to actually live in a property, there are down payment assistance programs. I also mentioned about the various grants that are available, and especially in Baltimore, they really want to get rid of these vacant properties. I mean, it's a shame to have someone living next to a property where they're holding boards up so that it won't fall over. So with that being said, there is plenty of money, especially if you are looking to live in the property.
And the second side of that is little money is relative. So, it depends on where you are in the process. Certainly, as it relates to residential, property, as it's been said all day, you can get in with just about nothing. The most expensive house I ever bought, I didn't pay anything to go in it at all. So, you can do that. The question is, when it comes to investment property, they're the typical, 20, 25% down requirements. So that's just a given because now you're in a whole different ballpark. So how you get that money and the means, even where you may partner with others, that's also a possibility, depending on the nature of the investment property that you're going to use. So you can form an LLC, you can get others to join you in terms of what you're looking to do. Or the other way is what I didn't touch on yet was, through real estate investment trust. So you can buy pieces of real estate investment and don't have to deal with being a landlord or any such thing. I own a part of the Under Armour property in Baltimore, right? Through a real estate investment trust, and the performance of it is excellent. So there are different ways to do that. All right.
Great, and thank you for that. And a couple of things you all mentioned earlier about using other people's money. That is the way to go. Yes. And so we have another question, which is a great one that can get a lot of people in trouble if they don't do this. What is the best way to vet contractors?
Okay, so it is really difficult trying to find contractors. Matter of fact, my mom, I had to tell her, please don't hire anybody anymore without calling me. Seriously, she's in Baltimore City, and she had to go to court because the person she gave money to ended up being brought in shackles after he took her money and didn't do the work. So from this point on, she does not talk to anybody without saying, I got to talk to your daughter first. Because what I'm doing is looking them up on the Better Business Bureau. I'm looking to see, are there any lawsuits against them? I'm asking for references. I want stuff in writing. And I'm looking at least 3 different ones because I just can't. I can't. And then they're preying on seniors. I mean, it was a shame. I mean, I'm like, she's in court, and this guy's brought in shackles. So I don't know how many other people that he stole their money from.
Yeah, the vetting contractors. So it's always good from now when you're starting to build a team, right? Your own team of people. Plumbers, electricians, the like, that even you will grow together with over time. So that thankfully is how I've survived the process. And again, learning, building your knowledge base to understand processes that are required. when I started, you cut corners. You're risk taking. You didn't have much, so you took risks. You grew up later to understand that you should always try to follow as best you can the requirements, all of the permitting laws and so forth. And that will help you, because once you have to find licensed people, that begins to narrow and reduce the risks that you will take. Because I've seen guys run some electrical cords that they should never have done, right? And that put you, let me say it this way. If you renovated a project and there were rules that were skipped, even though you may sell the thing later, if something happens and they can trace it back to your ownership, then you're liable. So sometimes we don't even understand the risk of cutting corners, okay?
I want to add to that. I, unfortunately, was dragged in to a situation with a client who was a seller, who was a flipper, okay, for 5 years with a lawsuit over something I had absolutely nothing to do with. I was just selling a house because of them cutting corners. And I have a closing that did not happen 3 days ago because 2.5 years ago, my active duty veteran client bought a house from a flipper. The new buyer went there for the walkthrough 2 days ago, and there's a sign saying illegal permitting for electrical. And he's like, what? I didn't do anything. I bought this house 2.5 years ago, but he had to sue the person over the plumbing that wasn't done correctly. And so now, the electrical, because of cutting corners, and that guy's off doing whatever, and now my client was stuck with pulling a permit for $700 and some for electrical work that he had nothing to do with, and a fine for $1,100 that he had nothing to do with. And the electrician was like, oh, I see this all the time in Baltimore, kind of thing.
And I think that goes back to preparation, which we discussed earlier, and just making sure that you connect yourself with those folks who do good jobs. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of people who do great work, and you want to stick with them, and it may cost you a little bit more money, but it will pay for itself in the end. I think we can all agree. We have another question from someone who's exploring opening a daycare center. And the question is, how do commercial and residential spaces compare in terms of scalability, profitability, and regulatory compliance? What advice would you give for making this choice?
Again, so now you're combining two things. This is the real estate as part of it, and the child care as another aspect. So child care is a business, and you're trying to find a location that will match your needs. So when you go into the market, you have to communicate those needs clearly to the agent or persons you're working with. So and the kinds of growths you're anticipating over time, because you could end up acquiring a spot that in a few years you'll go out of it. And at that point, you have to decide what you're doing with that real estate transaction, which was separate that you did. Now, can you hold the property? Do you have to flip the property? All of that. And so that's a different set of calculations. So what I'm saying to you is you have two transactions in my mind. And so make sure that the real estate transaction is one that you are in a position to do profitably regardless of your child care business. Because the other side is if the child care business goes under, you still got a piece of real estate, right, that you got to be clear you're doing. So understand you're dealing with two separate things.
funny you mention that because I'm licensed in DC in addition to Maryland, and last year I sold it wasn't a functioning daycare because it went under, but they owned multiple daycares, and it was a residential property that they had turned into a daycare, and the market fell apart, and they ended up keeping one of them open and having to close the other one that had gone from like 60 kids to nothing. So we had to market this property two ways. It was either going to be a daycare again, or it was going to be residential, and ended up going as residential because people were like, well, if they couldn't sustain it, like, we don't want to buy it. So it ended up selling not as the best use that my clients wanted it as, but as what it could be sold for. So it was just sold as a house at that point.
Great answers. And also maintaining your investment, right? If you don't have proper zoning and you buy a property, then you can't open your business, then you're really stuck. So another question, are there still those that bus neighborhood tours of Baltimore's? Where can they find them?
There's a trolley tour. Like, there's the website, I forgot what it's called. It's
Live Baltimore?
Live Baltimore, but they have the trolley tours, and you have to sign up for them. And look in advance, though, because those go really, really quick. But they still do those tours.
Great. And here's another great question. I think we have time for a couple more. 10 minutes? Was that 10 minutes? Okay, great. So what is the starting point for family members to come together to buy property together? How do you get the funding for that property?
Well, so I heard this question kind of come up in our earlier session. And if you looked at the response, my brothers and sisters, I want you to know that it was sad for me. Because what it pointed to was the distrust that we have for each other as a people. Because there was they alluded to how many other ethnic groups were willing to do these transactions as a means to build wealth and legacy. But we automatically operate from the standpoint that we would never do that. And that's sad. That's part of the distrust we have, even in buying services and other things from each other. So that's why the whole idea of how money circulates in our community, we are so low on the totem pole because we simply do not trust our own people, including sadly, our own families. Now think about that for a second. And so I believe within every family situation, it's just like when you come together on Thanksgiving, you know where everybody is. You know who is a drunkard, who is the this, who is the that, and so forth. I'm not suggesting to you that you pick the people who you obviously know you can't do business with and go into business. But you can't tell me that you can't find another like mind in all of your family, extended family, that that you can work with. That's an indictment of us. And so I'm just saying, just as how you can enter LLCs and other kind of corporate things with other persons, right? You should be able to use that to do with a like-minded family member, who when you lay out clearly what the goals are and so forth, and then you finance that based within some kind of entity, special purpose entity that you have created, and can function accordingly. So that's where I am on that. I have encouraged my kids and their friends included to create investment groups, and they sit and talk about stocks and da-da-da-da, and investors pool resources to do that. So I support the idea. You just have to figure out the way you paper what you're doing and the entities and the rules and governance as to how you make decisions and the like.
Great. Now, I do have another question, which I think is going to be really helpful for people in the audience. How can I leverage my current rental property to purchase another? Wanda?
Yes, okay. I actually have had a number of clients who've had rental properties. I actually have one now that we're going to get it rented, and then they have to show, of course, to the lender that we actually have a tenant and a proper lease, and it can't just be something they made up from Staples. I mean, it has to be a real person, a real lease, to be able to show them that they can then qualify for the next property. So that's actually, very good. But as I said, you definitely have to make sure that you have it truly rented and an actual lease and a person, and that you can cover that and be able to buy the next property.
Great answer. And I think a lot of people don't realize what the banks require as far as substantiation. For how long have those renters been there? Are you claiming it on your taxes?
Yes.
A lot of people like to rent under the...
Right, and I want to add too, because a lot of people, and I'll say you need a rental license, okay? I'm sorry, but you can't claim that you have a rental and you don't have a rental license, because I've given that advice to clients who did not listen, and then they're calling me, oh, help me, they're not paying. And it's like people are like, well, you don't even have a legal rental. I'm not going to help you evict these people. It's on you, basically. And it's sad, because they didn't want to spend a little bit of money to basically get a rental license and to have people come through and look to make sure that they're doing it legally.
Great answer. And also, I think access to resources. Like, there are people who do this work every day. So if it's overwhelming, thinking like I don't have time to do all of that, go get that expert.
Property manager
also, to help you with that.
Yes.
I think we have time for one or two. Okay, we have a couple more questions. What are the pros and cons of putting an investment property in an LLC or a trust?
I think you got that.
That you want to protect yourself, and if you don't have your property in one of these entities, then your protection falls to the kind of umbrella policies that you may have, because depending on what goes down at the property, the liability will eventually flow itself back to you, all right? And sometimes it can exceed what is just the basic insurance on that property. So to protect that, to create some separation between you and the property, I would put it in some form of LLC. That would be my recommendation, all right? And that, that's not going to cost you anything. It really doesn't. Okay. Which comes to the point, preparation. The preparation that you do will point to the fact that of things how you cover yourself. Now, everything is not needed, right? Certain kinds of insurance may not be needed, okay? So do your preparation, understand what's needed, factor in those needs as a cost of doing business. You're getting into business. You're an investor. So don't shuck and jive here. Get serious, understand. Your margin may be small at the beginning, but you're thinking long term. This is not something you're just doing and expecting to make money overnight. This is a long-term play. My play on this is that when I retire, I have enough revenues generating from different sources that I'm good. Okay? So I'm not in need of that income today. All right? So don't pinch, right? Too much. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish is what my mama used to say. Okay? So think through, and these are the, detail what the costs are from the very beginning, and then build structurally. Just the increase in rent that will happen, even with rent restrictions of the type that may exist. But things improve over time, all right? And that's just the reality of it.
Great. Another question concerning real estate investments. Are there any programs for vets that target their ability to do investments?
I don't know that the programs, the investment programs are not, investment is a whole different field. There are programs for vets and others in terms of the first-time home buying or home purchases, residential purchases. But when it comes to the investing, you'd have to go to VA and see how they may support. But I'm not aware of any specific programs that support investing in real estate.
I was going to say the same. Obviously, there's the VA loan, which is no money down, but typically those are designed for the actual homeowner who plans to live in the home.
Yeah.
Obviously, they also have the VA assumable loans, but then again, that's for you living in the property, not necessarily for an investor.
Right.
Thanks for answering that and others.
Unless your strategy is to move into the property and then buy another property and
as an owner-occupant.
and move out and then rent the property. So it would be 2 steps, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
And that works because I actually believe fundamentally that that's the easiest way to build a portfolio.
Well, the other thing, too, is you would definitely talk to one of our mortgage lender partners, because you're owner-occupant, and then it's a rental property, but then if you want to buy another property, you still have that, so you'll probably have to convert that to a different type of loan.
If you meet, and especially the time requirements. Here's another question, and I think we have 1 more minute. Folks want to understand more about land private use investments, like investing in parking lots. And I guess those non-structure related type of land deals. Any information on that?
Well, I mean, it's the same rules, right? You're going to present yourself to a bank or financing group, and you're going to make the argument as to why they should finance you for the property. And the first key issue is going to be, what's the size of your down payment? Because once they can fairly appraise the value, is how much skin are you going to put in the game, right? And then, because it's land, if it's not land that you already have some kind of arrangement or can show a history of it making money, how you make money using the property, then what they want to know then is, so how are you going to pay the mortgage, right? So if your own cash flow or other things can support that, then that's it right there, okay? So all I would say is, go talk to your lender. They will tell you what they need, what they're willing to do based on who you are. Right? So as you're building assets, right, there comes a point where you can now get more asset-based loans because of who you are and the portfolio of assets that you now own. Or in other words, your equity, your net equity of who you are, you know. And so you build equity, and now you have 6-figure or 7-figure equity or whatever. You know, you walk in and you talk with your lender from a different vantage point. All right? So that's really the process. What I was referring to earlier when I say you got to have a strategy. Now, I didn't have anybody guiding me on. In fact, I didn't even, the slide I showed about the different types of real estate investment, I didn't even know that when I started. All I knew was if I could buy another house and rent the one I was in. Okay? So that was my focus. I didn't think about land or commercial or whatever. Nobody was talking to me about REITs or any kind of stuff. I'm now at a place where I have investments in much of all of these types, but it was learned over time, and because my portfolio of assets grew, I was able to, and then you're talking with different people and somebody introduces you. I mentioned Under Armour. It was somebody who said, hey, I had said to one day, it's a Jewish friend of mine, I said, us, when you hear people talking about us just want somebody to give us an opportunity, we're not asking for the rules to change. We just want somebody to tell us that something exists that we can go into. And so they were doing that deal. And he called me and said, okay, I'm going to give you 3 units if you can find 3 of you. Right? And that was it. I was offered to bring myself in and find 2 other folks who could do a similar thing. Right? And that's all we were looking for, an entry point. But you had to prepare that when that opportunity came, right? That when that opportunity came, you could act on it. So over time, you'll get there. Just lay out your strategy, build one step at a time, and you will be amazed at where you will get to. But it's not gonna happen just because you dream about it. You're gonna have to put work into it, right? When the other property I showed, the picture of that property in Jamaica, that essentially was just would be our second home, kind of speak. I had never been in one of those before. Okay, with the opportunity, I'd never been in a place like that. And when I heard the kind of the persons who when they're not using it, that they would rent it to and so forth, it blew my mind. The people who had used that property, right? So I was immediately drawn to it, really. But then I had to check myself and say, come on, Lance. It's just not what you want to do, right? But it was tempting, boy. I was in a LOI, and the next thing was was the contract, and we pulled out at the last minute, So that's how it is. Yep. So it's all about your plan. It's all about what you're going to take from here, and when you're going to sit down with somebody else. The Bible says in the multitude of counsel, a thing is established. So you're going to find advisors, right? You're going to find people you talk to, bankers, agents, financial advisors, whatever you need to. Your lawyers, always have a good lawyer. I think that's one of the best moves I did because my oldest daughter is an accountant. My second daughter is an attorney. So, I got in-house. But, you want to build a team, reliable team that you can confer with. Don't feel any pressure to perform overnight. No, this is a long-term play, and start walking one step at a time.
Great. Well, we do have to end here. It's 12:36, and I want to thank you Ms. Yolanda and Reverend Loxley, and we do have resources. One thing that we've heard a lot about is about preparation and aligning yourself with people who know how to get this work done, but you still have to do your due diligence because you could have a different outcome working with someone that someone else did. So we really encourage you to go out there, access the resources, and but also do your due diligence and figure out who you need to work with. But thank you for coming. Hopefully you learned a lot, and we will be doing more of these type of seminars as we move forward. But thank you so much.
And remember, December 6th,